Welcome to my free course on how to use a virtual assistant to drive profit. And through this course, I'm going to provide as much value as I can in a straightforward way. And I'm not going to talk about ideas. I'm actually going to give you a physical blueprint. And if you look at the description of this video, you'll see a link to the packet that you're going to get at the end of this course. That packet is the step-by-step action plan that you need to take. And what's even better about that action plan is that once you hire someone, you can give that packet to your virtual assistant and they can implement it themselves. So we're not only minimizing the amount of work that you need to do to get a virtual assistant onboarded, but then also minimizing the processes once you actually have them fully on. You don't even need to watch this video. If you want, you can just hand the packet to your virtual assistant and they'll be set. Of course, there's things here and there that you're gonna need to do to help get them set up, but for the most part, they should be able to implement this. But in this video, I'm gonna be thoroughly explaining our processes and the nuances in the video. So if you want to invest a little bit into getting to know what the packet entails and getting your time back, this video will save you countless hours. So by the end of this course, you should have a game plan on how to use a virtual assistant to help your business reach maximum profit. And I am going to go over some of the problems that I have personally encountered, and while also providing my personal workarounds and shortcuts, taking everything that I have learned from years of running a virtual assistant company, and I'm going to give it to you. I'm also going to share how I used my personal virtual assistants to drive value for both my business and my clients' businesses. Because these processes did not happen overnight. It took a lot of trial and error. But this course is everything I wish I would have known and implemented into my business from the get-go. And here are the 5 main sections featured in this video, and feel free to jump around to your pain points. You don't just have to watch this all in one sitting back to back. But all of these sections tie into maximizing your company profit. So choosing the right virtual assistant is going to be the first piece. The second is going to be operations task. Then third, sales task. Fourth, personal time saving task. And then 5 is going to be what to get set up before they start. So if you want to give this packet to your virtual assistant, skip to 5. And I have seen some other videos out there on tasks that you can assign your virtual assistant, but the problem that I have noticed with a lot of these videos is that they are still putting the mental load on you. You have to organize and define the task, then you have to monitor the progress and make the changes along the way. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that in this video. Instead, I'm going to make processes for you and provide you resources that will allow these tasks to be implemented on an ongoing basis without having to monitor your virtual assistant. So at the end of this course, you'll have a packet with all of the information you need to hand it over to your virtual assistant. The goal of this packet is to be a starting place for your virtual assistant. You can customize it however you would like. But this will be the baseline that you need to get a virtual assistant up and running. And if you feel like you're incredibly busy and you can't keep your head above water and don't even want to onboard someone because you don't have time to monitor and babysit them, then this packet is for you. This packet is the key to turning your virtual assistant into an autonomous operator that provides immense value to your business without you having to monitor and constantly watch over them. And before we get started, I want to address the 3 biggest problems that I have personally seen when people hire a virtual assistant. The first is that their virtual assistant needs to be told what to do. And this really starts with the hiring process, which is what we're going to address in the first portion of this video. But once you get this packet, once you get this play-by-play, if your virtual assistant is not able to follow this play-by-play, then you need a new virtual assistant. And that's just a baseline. This is meant to be entry level. It's meant to be a step-by-step process. If a virtual assistant can't do that and follow this process, get rid of them. And the second thing is that I see people run out of things to assign their virtual assistant. And I've had customers fire an assistant after 1 month because they didn't have enough for them to do. And the real deal is that is it's reckless hiring. Start your VA on these repetitive tasks. Once they have mastered that, then it's time to start thinking about mirroring you throughout the day. Have them shadow you and learn what you do so that you can assign it to them and focus on relationship building. And then the third common thing that I see when hiring a virtual assistant is that they're unable to complete the tasks that you really need done in the business. So anything you are doing in your business, you learned how to do. If you are doing it, someone else can do it as well. And you need to remove the mental block of thinking that you're the only one who can do tasks for your business. Take a step back and let someone else take a swing at things. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to let someone else try. And of course, there will be tasks that you cannot have someone else do, but 70% of your business can be done by someone else, but you have to provide a space for that to actually happen. I see this occur a lot with some of my solopreneurs where they don't want to give up control and it ends up hurting them in the long run. And if your virtual assistant can't get tasks done even after you've assigned it time after time again, that goes back to point one, fire them and get somebody else who can help you and actually reduce not only your time, but your mental load as well. And what I want for you more than anything else from watching this course is I want for you to be able to focus on those 30% of tasks that genuinely no one else can do, that make you special and make you run the business. And I want those 30% to become 100% of your day, because that's when growth happens. And look, I get that a lot of influencers talk about time optimization, but you can do two things when you get 70% of your schedule back. You can either spend time and effort on growth, or you can relax and work less. I'm not here to tell you that a virtual assistant will help you work yourself to death. If you want that, great, but it's up to you. The last thing I'll say in this introduction is that this packet does not have to be used all at once. Whoever you hire should have a few skill sets, and they should start with what they are good at and then add on over time. This doesn't have to be immediate. All right, let's jump in. And if you find this useful, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help share other tips, tricks, and resources, especially from my own experience. Okay, so this is the first section of the course, which is choosing the right virtual assistant. And this is really the foundation of this course, because if you don't choose the right virtual assistant, nothing that I give you, none of the resources are gonna matter. And I have people tell me all the time that their virtual assistant is not taking any initiative. That's not something that gets fixed over time. If your assistant is continuously making the same mistakes, or even worse, hitting a roadblock and just abandoning what they were working on, honestly, you're babysitting. And if you're babysitting your virtual assistant, you might as well not have one. And so I made this video to give tips and tricks on maximizing your virtual assistant, but that's only going to be effective if they're coming from a place of autonomy. So I run a company called Digital Executive that actually goes out and finds virtual assistants for people, and a large number of our customers that have been working with other firms come to us specifically because they aren't clicking with the virtual assistant that they've been assigned or given, or they're constantly having to babysit their virtual assistant. And we find really good VAs, and we do that because I personally get involved in the sourcing process, and we custom source. We don't keep a bench of people just ready and waiting. We try to find the right person for you. So I'm gonna give you the play-by-play on how we source good virtual assistants and how we personality match. So even if you don't want to go through a firm and want to go just directly to hire your own virtual assistant, you'll have the tools to do so from the perspective of custom sourcing. So we're going to start with the job description. And you can set intention in your job description. A good job description should give an incredibly clear picture of what the company does and who you are. And I see a lot of ChatGPT job descriptions. Stop it. Just stop it. It makes you seem scammy. And if you're posting a generic job description, the people who are generally applying for those roles tend to be less qualified. So instead, be specific and then talk in specifics about what your company does and what your day-to-day looks like. Then list out the monthly payment clearly. Make that crystal clear. And this will save you a ton of time. And if you're not willing to set a budget, you're gonna have a lot of qualified candidates pass over your company because they don't wanna waste their time interviewing for a job that's not gonna even be paying them enough to begin with. And the response that I always get when I say to people, or when I say this to people, is, well, I would pay more for the right person. Stop that. Stop it. If you would pay more for the right person, list the maximum salary you would be willing to pay and choose the best person that applies. And also include in the job description the technologies that you use every day. Then go ahead and list out the responsibilities. Make this as clear as crystal so people know exactly what their day will look like. Next, describe who you are looking for. This is your chance to explain your company culture a little bit. And if you want a virtual assistant who is friendly and outgoing, it's okay to describe that. If you want a virtual assistant who is more introverted and meticulous, also explain that that's your expectation for the role or who you think would be the best personality fit. This is someone you'll be talking with every single day. Just skimp on the preferred personality. You don't want to work with someone who annoys you. And if you take a look at the packet that we provided, we have some job templates lined out for you. So all you have to do is copy and paste your own personal details about your company and the specifics of the role if you want to add on anything else. And like I said before, this is a high value packet with $2,500 worth of information, and we're just giving it away for free in order to help you hire. So we're gonna start with resume selection. Any red flags a candidate has will usually show up in the resume before the interviews even start. And after you post a job description, you're going to get inundated with resumes, which means you're gonna have to look through a lot of them. And instead of finding resumes that you really like, you need to first start excluding resumes that are not a good fit. So I'm gonna spend the next part of this course talking about the instant disqualifiers in resumes. And the first, starting off strong, is spelling errors. If someone has spelling errors or typos in the resume that they are sending to potential employers, I hate to break it to you, but they're going to be sending janky emails on your behalf after the hire. No joke, I actually had someone write on a resume that they were detail-oriented and they spelled oriented incorrectly. So if you start seeing a lot of spelling mistakes on resumes, just move those to the no pile. And some people might say, well, there are people with learning disabilities who might have trouble with grammar or spelling. And I agree. But even if that is true, or even if that is the case for that individual, they should be using either a digital aid or have someone else look and spell check a resume. And I've hired a lot of people with learning disabilities over the years. And guess what? None of them had a typo on their resume because they either had someone check it over or they used an aid to help them. If somebody truly wants to get hired, they're going to spell check the resume and they're going to make sure it's perfect because they want to get work. And spelling errors at the end of the day are a good indication that someone has low attention to detail for their work or they just don't care about the job. Second is any short stint at previous employment. And I see people complain about gaps in employment a lot, but that honestly doesn't bother me. There's a lot of reasons that people will take off of work, and I don't really think it's fair to fault someone for almost any of the reasons that people take off for long periods of time. Someone who took 5 months off of work 3 years ago because their mom died did the right thing and doesn't deserve to be asked about it in a job interview. So I would actually refrain from asking about big gaps of unemployment. However, if people are staying short stints at multiple jobs, that's another story. And I think even most people watching this video have had a job that they quit pretty immediately. I know I definitely have. I've had multiple jobs that I quit after the first month because of various reasons. Particularly when I was young and working jobs where the companies had predatory practices. But here's the deal. Those 1 to 3 month experiences are not on my resume, and they weren't when I was applying for jobs. If someone has a ton of short experiences on their resume, they're going to be prone to job hop, or they're prone to getting fired. It's one thing to have short stints, it's another thing to actually list them. And my general rule of thumb is that if you want to look for resumes, make sure you're looking at resumes that have 2 years or more at a role. And 2 years is enough to see the full business cycle. That means they saw the company hit a low point and they saw the company hit a high point, and they stayed through all of it. And even multiple experiences that are all about a year long can indicate whoever you're hiring is uncomfortable with change and will leave the minute things do start to get uncomfortable. The third thing that you should watch out for is self-employment. And I hate this one because I feel like I'm actually rooting against myself as well, and most of the people watching this video. But that being said, I am an entrepreneur and I've owned my own business for 7 years. And I would make a terrible employee. There's certain cadence that comes with being your own boss and having to make decisions. And making that mental switch to just working on one small aspect of the company is really difficult. And you can always hire an entrepreneur, but the chance that they are working another job or they have a freelance agency on the side is going to be really high. And if you're okay with that, no worries, but it is something you should be aware of. And if you're not okay with it, don't hire someone who has owned their own company. There are exceptions. And to be fair, one of my recruiters used to own a beauty parlor, and she's phenomenal. But she made it very clear in the resume, or in the interview, because I asked her about it, that she no longer wanted to be a business owner. Because she was a business owner and she had a lot of insight into some of the processes. She actually became very effective, and she's still, to this day, one of my best employees. But I think that that's an exception. It really is at your own risk. And I'd say my experience is pretty rare. Usually hiring someone who is a serial entrepreneur just means that you're a stopping point until they get to the next thing or move on. So those are some of the red flags that can come up in the resume selection process. You might find some other ones that are more relevant to you or your industry, but once you eliminate some of the resumes that might not be the best fit or the immediate no's, you're gonna wanna go through the yes pile and find people to start interviewing. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk about interviewing. And interviewing is so freaking hard. You probably will not believe this, but I promise it is true. Our show rate for interviews is around 50%, if not less. And when I tell people that, they never believe me. And that's because it doesn't make sense. Like, why would someone go through the trouble of submitting a resume, getting an email back from the recruiter, then booking a call, and then just not show up? I don't know. It's baffling to me too. But you have to know that that is the show rate. So when you're going through resumes, that's why I suggested earlier that you don't want to just pick your favorite resumes out and interview those few people, because you're setting yourself up for disappointment. You have to pick a bunch of resumes and book a set of interviews, because at the end of the day, the show rates are often so low that this becomes a numbers game. So in this section of the course, I'm going to go over the best way to structure your interviews. And in the packet, we'll have an outline structure as well as some good interview questions. So let's start with the interview structure. So in the interview, you want to start off by introducing yourself and the company, and then also give a brief overview of the actual role, specifically the day-to-day. And you should write this piece down and give the same explanation each time that you conduct an interview. And try to mention things that were not in the job description that was written online, because they should have already read that over. They should already know that like the back of their hand. So then when you open the floor up to ask any questions, make sure you do that before the interview actually begins. So after you give your introduction, before you start interviewing. And I see a lot of recommendations to push the candidate questions to the back of the interview, but you actually want to start with questions in the front half of the interview. And I answer all questions at the beginning because it's a good measure of how succinct and aware they are. So if someone spends 15 minutes asking questions, it's going to be eating into their interview time. And sometimes interviews run long, and you want to make sure that a candidate has time to ask questions, so you do want to put that at the front and try to front load that. And even more so, sometimes your answer to a question might be a deal breaker for them, and so they'll opt to leave the interview early. So that just saves everybody's time. And so next, you want to set the stage that you are going to ask some questions. So before you begin, just state that you're going to be asking some interview questions, and then tell them the exact number of questions that you are going to ask so that they can pace themselves as well. Someone is going to answer differently if you're only asking 3 questions versus 20. And I have found that 7 interview questions tends to be ideal. 8 can work as well. And now, I say this candidly, just like I had said not to use ChatGPT to write your job description, don't have it write your interview questions either. And I'll tell you why. I don't know why ChatGPT does this, but they create 2-part questions when you ask them to write down interview questions for you. And 2-part questions are traditionally awful interview questions. Interviews are stressful. And if you ask 2-part questions, most of the time, people only answer 1/2 of the question because they're in a stress environment, they're nervous, and their brain is just picking up the most important pieces that you're asking. And I don't think that that's actually an indication if someone is a good candidate or a bad one. So just stick to 1-part questions. And it's not hard to write good interview questions. They just need to be original. And I see a lot of people Google good interview questions. But just like you Googled good interview questions, your candidate Googled the best answers to the most common interview questions. So you're not really getting good answers when you're just reading off the most common interview questions. You're getting a regurgitated TikTok answer rooted in pseudo-psychology. And honestly, that sucks. So let's skip that process and just go the original route. Okay, so in this portion, I'm gonna actually talk about the specific interview questions that you can ask. So my first favorite thing to do is start with a scenario. And I would create a scenario that requires some critical thinking. For example, of a favorite scenario of mine is your boss is supposed to fly out of France on Wednesday, but all of the planes have been grounded due to a strike until Friday. She has an event in the United States on Thursday, so she definitely has to be back by then. What would you do? And the correct answer is taking a train to a nearby city. But this question shows not only creative problem solving, but the ability to overcome an obstacle and think on your feet. Second, in your own words, can you tell me about what you think your day-to-day would look like if you were to get this position? And I love this question because this tells me how much research someone did on the role and the company. And if someone wants the job, they'll research it. This is also a reflection on how much work that they'll put into assigned tasks once they're actually on the job and hired. And if you're taking multiple interviews and multiple people are getting this question wrong, then you might need to do a better job of making the job description and company offering a little bit more clear. Third, why did you apply for this position? It's a simple question, but I love it. And because it allows people to go one of two ways. They can either talk about how they hate their current job, or they can talk about why they were excited for this one. And you wouldn't think people would talk about how much they hate their job, but it happens a lot. And it's a clear glimpse into their tact and understanding of social situations. And it's also a clear way to gauge about how passionate they are about the position that they're applying for. 4, can you give me an example of a time that you solved a problem before it became a larger issue? And I love this question because it shows the type of employee that they are. Is their idea of problem solving just part of a basic expectation of the job, or are they actually going above and beyond? A common bad answer I get to this question is spotting an error on a report. And to me, at least, that's just part of the basic completion of your job description. And that's why they have someone checking reports over, because you're supposed to catch mistakes. Versus, I was interviewing someone for an executive assistant position once, and she was working as a travel agent at the time when I asked her this question. And she told me an absolutely wild story. She had a client miss a flight, and the guy was extremely upset. He called her and he was crying, right? It was like a really sad situation. And so she tried calling the airline, but the airline wasn't picking up, wasn't answering, she couldn't get through. So instead of waiting for the airline to call her back, she actually drove to the airport near her to talk directly to a gate agent. And they ended up getting the guy rebooked on the last flight going out that day. And I hired her. She's great. And the thing is, she consistently goes above and beyond. 5, how do you stay organized? And when you're interviewing someone, you want to get a sneak peek into their brain. And this question definitely does that. If someone does not have a task organization system, they're probably going to miss half the stuff you tell them to do, or you're going to constantly have to remind them. And the most interesting answer I have ever gotten for this question was someone who actually asked if they could screen share with me when I asked this question. And they showed me how they had built a custom Asana profile and how they optimized everything in their lives on Asana. And that was everything from their grocery list to when their kid had important tests or quizzes to last minute tasks at work that they had to assign and complete. Number 6, what would you like to do in your free time? Tell me a little bit about yourself as a person. And this is a self-explanatory question, but you really need to figure out if someone is a culture fit. It's super important, and I actually don't know why that's not listed as a commonly suggested interview question. There are also certain jobs that you might want someone more introverted versus someone who's more extroverted to do. I made this mistake hiring a few years ago. I had to fill a job for a position that required somebody to work weekends. And during the interview process, I asked the first candidate what he liked to do in his free time. His answer was that he liked to hang out with his friends and play soccer. And we ended up hiring him because he was incredibly qualified, but he quit within the first month. And it's because he didn't really want to work on the weekends. And when he gave a little bit of insight into himself, I should have seen that it wasn't a fit. So now that's always something I don't ignore. We always really try to do personality fits, and you should too. And so for the next hire, we got someone who said that he liked to woodwork and play video games in his free time. And he was a way better culture fit for the position. And he's actually still working for that same company. I hope those 6 questions were useful and that can be used as a base. But I've actually included extra questions, and in the packet, there's a list of 15 interview questions and a step-by-step guide on why the psychology behind each question actually makes the question useful. And if you really cannot think of any interview questions, these are really good one to ask. but I would highly recommend just giving a scenario that comes up every day in your job, and I would ask how they would solve it. You can't expect them to solve the problem exactly how you would, but you can expect them to give a process, which will provide a lot of insight. Hiring is hard. You can find the perfect candidate, and it might not be a fit for a completely unexpected reason. For example, I had hired a receptionist for a company once, and they loved her. Day one, they were calling us, telling us how much they loved her, how excited they were. And she was born and raised in the same area, so she was familiar with the region, and she had a lot of experience in the field, great references, easy to talk to. But just 2 days into the job, she quit completely out of the blue and didn't tell us why. So we ended up staffing someone else that was not a first choice. But she's still in the role, she still loves it, and the company couldn't be happier. Sometimes hiring doesn't work out and there's no reason to it. But hopefully this packet and video will provide some insight so you can get started in the right direction, but it is not an exact science. My best advice is just to be patient. And now that we have all the nitty-gritty out of the way, in the next section, we're going to dive into the actual task that you should assign your virtual assistant, and that's going to be starting with operations. Okay, so in this section of the course, we're going to be diving into some operations practices your assistant can implement. And I'm personally not an operations person, and it took me a really long time to get my operations figured out. And I've taken everything that has personally been helpful for me and put it into a repeatable standard operating procedure. And in this section, I'm going to talk about the different tasks that your assistant can implement and show you how to set these processes up step by step. This is not meant to be confusing or just give you a framework. We fully built these processes out for you so that when you get started, you can hit the ground running and actually implement these into your business without having to massively tweak them or cross-apply them. So we're gonna start with Gmail setup. If Google hosts your domain, go ahead and create an email address for your new assistant. It's super simple. First, log into your Google admin account. Next, select users from the left-hand side. Then you're gonna see a box that says add user. Add the user, and this is very important. Make sure that you enter in your VA's personal email address as the secondary email. That way it prompts them to set up their new Gmail account and you don't have to do any extra legwork. It'll all be able to be done from their side. One thing to note is that they do have to sign in relatively quickly. I believe it's 24 hours after you do the steps, so make sure this is done right after they start. So next is the Google Calendar setup. So once you have their Gmail set up, you're gonna need to share your personal calendar as well as your work calendar with your assistant. And I know some people are a little hesitant to give out their calendar information, but you definitely need to get past that in order to have a good relationship with your assistant. In order to be effective, they have to know your calendar, and everything should live and die by the calendar. And this also gives them an idea of when you're available. So you're not getting pinged when you're in the middle of a client meeting. It makes them work around your schedule, which is exactly what you want. So to share your calendar, go to Google Calendar and make sure you are accessing this in your Google Chrome browser. It just makes everything a little bit easier. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you should see a section titled My Calendars. Hover above the calendar you want to share until you see 3 little dots pop up over the hover. So you're gonna click the 3 dots and this will create a pop-up menu, and from there on the pop-up menu, click Settings and Sharing, and this will open this screen that you see here on the left-hand side of this pop-up screen. You should see a menu that says Settings for My Calendars. In that section, click on Access Permissions for Events. That will take you to a section in the settings titled Share with Specific People or Groups. At the bottom of this section, you will be prompted to share with specific people. In In the add email box, make sure you add their newly created Gmail account. And it's important that you add their new Gmail account because this will allow them to see the actual information of different events. If you add their personal email, they will have limited calendar access. They'll only be able to see when you're busy. They won't actually be able to see what the events are, access any information about them. Then it will prompt you to add a permission, and it's up to you, but I strongly recommend selecting make changes to events. And the reason I recommend this option is because they are going to be the ones to reschedule and move your calendar around in the event that something happens. So if they don't have the ability to edit your events, they won't be able to be effective if you get tied up. So let me give you a very real example of when this comes in handy. Last year, I got completely stranded while I was on vacation. I was supposed to come back on Monday, but I actually couldn't even get a flight out until Thursday. And I was in an area with extremely limited internet access, unfortunately. And the internet access would go out for hours at a time. But my assistant tracked my flight, saw the cancellation, and proactively moved the 32 meetings I had scheduled during that time, and she was actually even able to take some herself. And we had a few meetings that were time sensitive. But because she was able to edit my calendar, not only was she able to prioritize the meetings that needed to get prioritized, but she was also able to assign the right people to them. So if you don't realize how important it is to have someone else managing your calendar, you will when you need them to. So I suggest go ahead and proactively make that decision. Okay, so now let's move on to meetings. And this is also a personal preference, but I actually have had my assistant sit in on calls, especially with clients and staff. And I know it's very popular to have an AI notes recorder, but honestly, a lot of people have an AI recorder and they never actually import the meeting notes into their CRM. So you're missing a really large portion of having those notes. So your assistant should be completing that final step. And it's also a good checks and balances system to have your assistant on the call, especially when it comes to nuance, and just to make sure that the AI, even if you are pairing still with an AI, that they're catching everything. And sometimes something might get casually mentioned that actually ends up being very important. For example, I had a client change a start date on a follow-up meeting once, and it was mentioned very casually and only one time. So because it was such a small detail, the AI translator actually didn't pick up on it. And sometimes small comments can create large action items. And if you have an assistant on the call, they'll really be able to prioritize that. Plus, having an assistant on the call is the best way to acclimate somebody into the business. If you have someone who knows what's going on, they can make informed decisions. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on a call with my assistant and she will catch something that I miss. Like me agreeing to send over paperwork in 2 weeks from today, when 2 weeks from today turns out to be a national holiday. She's able to catch those things when she sits in on a call that an AI might not take note of. So additionally, when it comes to client support, you should have a few different touch points with clients, and it should come from a generic support email. And this is for a few reasons. Multiple people on the team should be able to see the emails to clients and be able to respond to client emails. If a client complaint is just going to one individual, there's a high likelihood that it can get missed. If someone leaves the team, it should not impact client communications. So by having just a generic response email, that increases visibility and everyone on the team can see what's going on. And there are 2 ways to create a shared email address, but I'm going to show you one way to do it for free. So we are going to first start out by going to your Google admin account, and you're going to toggle over to the directory on the left-hand side of the page and expand directory, then click on groups. Next, click create group for the name and email. I would suggest inputting either help or info at your company name. Then you're going to want to make sure to add the group owners, and I would put yourself, and once you hit it, it will take you to the next access type page. And I would highly recommend setting it So anyone external can contact the group owners. That is going to allow your customers to send you emails at that address. So create the group and then go ahead and invite your assistant. So this will allow them to respond from that support email. And not only will this highly encourage transparency with client relationships and bring some accountability to your team overall, but now your assistant can not only see client communications, they can also help you manage them, especially when it comes to your responses. And if you have your assistant on the calls, your clients will get to know them and build that relationship. And this way, they can also start mimicking your responses for the future if they're able to see what you say. So they can keep track of urgent emails and overall make sure your clients get great customer service. You might not think that this is a priority, and I completely understand, but I guarantee it absolutely is. And you don't realize it until you've missed a client communication while you were on vacation, or until it does become relevant and you have an angry client. So let's talk about the formula that we use to have an assistant create impactful client touch points. And no matter what your client frequency is, your assistant should be checking in with clients twice before a service or appointment and once afterwards. And you can spend a lot of time and money on automated systems, but I find when you get a personalized response from an assistant, it goes a long way, which is again why you want to include your assistant on calls, because they're building that client relationship. So 3 days before any service, your assistant should reach out via email and text, with not only a meeting reminder, but also a description of the agenda meeting. And this can be as simple as stating that it is a free consultation, or as complicated as a fully structured meeting. But either way, it will provide clarity to the nature of the appointment so that you can also clear up any miscommunications. I think this is a really good way just to make sure everybody entering into any meeting is on the same page. And it also allows them to bring up issues before the meeting so you can prepare yourself. So next, the hour before your appointment, your assistant should reach out and send a "we'll see you at the appointment" text. Keep it short and sweet. This would even be something that you can automate, and depending on your booking software, but I would really highly recommend still sending out that appointment and having your assistant manage it. And then once the appointment has concluded, your assistant should reach out for personalized feedback. If you send a generic survey, the response rates are usually pretty low, but if you send out a personalized email from your assistant, people will be significantly more likely to give honest feedback. I even have my assistant send my clients emails just completely out of the blue, even when we don't have anything on the books, just to check in and help build that relationship. And so in our packet that we're providing, I'm going to include text and email templates your assistant can send, and you can feel free just to copy and paste from that packet. So another operations task that you can definitely outsource to an assistant is bookkeeping. And I know a lot of people are a little weary about giving someone access to their books. And honestly, you should be. Even if you use a bookkeeper in the US, they will be on view only to access QuickBooks. And programs like QuickBooks are pretty hard to follow unless you are extremely familiar with them. So I'm gonna show you how to give your personal assistant setup with very little to no experience. They don't have to be an experienced CPA or bookkeeper. No experience in accounting, somebody can still do this. But by having your assistant organize the books for your business and doing this in a way where they don't actually have access to any of the processes, this will massively cut down on your tax bill at the end of the year. Your assistant will be able to categorize everything and prepare it for your CPA. And this way, when it comes time to do your taxes, your CPA bill will be significantly lower because you've completed all of the grunt work for them. And also, they'll be keeping up with your expenses for the year. So when January 1st rolls around, you'll be able to get your taxes filed a lot sooner as well. And you also won't be scrambling at the last minute, trying to get everything organized and then just sending basically a heap off to your CPA. And your assistant is going to need to create 2 things in order to effectively do this. The first is the balance sheet, and the second is the profit and loss statement. And in this packet, we're gonna give you a step-by-step guide on how to create each of these products in Google Sheets so that you do not have to spend money on accounting software. And this is meant to be step-by-step. Even someone who has never done accounting should be able to follow this. So to get started, you're gonna want to give your assistant access to bank statements or credit card statements. And there are two ways to do this. Depending on your bank, you can give view-only access to your bank account. And the other way would be sending out bank statements to your assistant at the end of each month as a PDF. And if you're extra worried about security, you can always edit out bank statement numbers or anything like that, so they're just looking at the actual data. So for the profit and loss statement, in order to create it, they are going to need to create this income statement using Google Sheets and using bank and credit card statements. So it's an excellent way to track the financial performance of a business over a specific period. And usually this is done on a monthly basis. And so here's a detailed guide on how to prepare a P&L statement from scratch, especially for someone with minimal bookkeeping experience. Okay, so let's dive right in. So step one is to set up your Google Sheets. So you're gonna wanna open Google Sheets and create a new blank spreadsheet. And then you're gonna wanna name this spreadsheet to reflect its purpose. So you can just start with P&L statement for company name and then the month and the year. And then step two is to prepare the header. So in the top cells, center the title and the period the statement covers. For example, in the cell A1, type profit and loss statement. In A2, type the company name. And in A3, type for the month ending in date. Step three, you're gonna wanna define the columns. So you'll need columns for the type of transaction, the amount, and maybe a column for notes if needed. So typically these might be labeled as description, amount, and notes. Step four, list revenue. So start your first section with revenue. This includes all money in the business has earned during this month. So beneath revenue, list different sources of income such as sales, service income, whatever it may be. And based on your review of the bank and credit card statements, you're gonna wanna enter each amount next to its respective description. Step five, you're gonna wanna calculate total revenue. So below your list of income sources, sum up all the revenues to get total revenue. And use this formula right here. Sum B, start row, B, end row, where B represents the column with the amounts listed. Step six, list expenses below the total revenue. Begin a new section titled expenses and list out the expenses that the business has occurred over the past month. This includes items like rent, utilities, office supplies, credit card payments, especially for business purchases, whatever else it may be. And again, categorize these based on your review of the statements. Step seven, you're gonna wanna calculate total expenses. At the end of the expense list, sum all the expenses to find total expenses. Step eight, calculate net profit or loss. Below the total expenses, calculate the net profit or loss that is calculated as total revenue minus total expenses. Enter a formula like this one right here. Step nine, you're gonna wanna do formatting. So use formatting tools to make the document clear and easy to read. You might be wanting to use bold for the section headers and the total rows, and perhaps maybe some different colors for revenue and expenses. But adjust column widths as needed to ensure all the data is visible. This is really important, it has to be readable. And then step 10, you're gonna wanna review and regularly update. So every single month, you're gonna wanna go over all the transactions, look at everything from last month, see if anything's changed from the credit card statements or the bank statements. And at the end of the month, update the P&L statement with new transactions and data to keep track of the company's financial performance. At the end of the day, this is really just data entry once you get the hang of it. And then step 11, you're gonna wanna save and back up everything. Google Sheets is gonna automatically save, and it's gonna automatically keep your backup of the workflow, but you're gonna also wanna take PDF copies so that if things are edited after, you have that snapshot of what it looked like at the end of the month. So additional tips that I can give is just basically regular communication. If there's an expense that comes up that you don't know how to categorize, ask. Always make sure that you're looking, getting a full statement from the P&L, and that you're constantly keeping up with expenses so the business can make informed decisions. So this approach is going to be the best way to maintain an effective P&L statement using your available transaction records. And it's especially useful for any sort of financial documentation. And so what we're going to do in the packet that we give y'all, it's going to have a very clear step-by-step list. This was just kind of an overview, but this is going to walk you through every single scenario, how to categorize every single type of transaction, every single different category listed, and it's going to be extremely comprehensive so that you'll have a step-by-step guide on how to fully process the books. And again, you're still going to have a CPA look over this, but this is really just to get all of your statements. Every single charge that goes in and out of any of your accounts or any of your credit cards needs to be recorded in that profit and loss statement as an expense. After you get the P&L statement, next we're going to move on to the balance sheet. And balance sheets determine the company's financial position based on transaction. So here is how you can do this in Google Sheets with a monthly update process. So step one, you're going to want to gather the documents. So as a business owner, all of those documents should have already been turned over: bank statements, credit card statements, any other in and out of the account, and any other financial information available that is going to impact the balance sheet. So invoices, receipts, things that haven't appeared on statements yet, anything that's relevant is going to need to be collected, right? So you can even just print out invoices, especially ones that haven't been paid. So step two, you're going to want to set up your Google Sheet. So start a new spreadsheet. Name your spreadsheet with the company name, followed by the month and year, just like your corporation, balance sheet, January 2027. Step three, you're going to want to input data. And so you're going to create two main sections on your sheet, one being for bank transactions and one for credit card transactions. And you're going to want to label the first few rows with headers like date, description, debit, and credit. Debits are money out and credits are money in. And so step four, you're going to want to categorize the transactions. So go through each transaction on the bank and credit card statements, enter the transactions under the appropriate headers, use the description field to categorize each transaction. So office supplies, service income, utilities. In the packet, we're going to have a full list of categories that your assistant can use. And then step five, it comes to identifying assets and liabilities. So assets, these are going to include bank account balances, accounts receivable. So even anything that's coming in is still going to be included in that, and any significant prepaid expenses as well. So liabilities, so these include credit card statements, loans, or accounts payable. So the money that you are owed, but you have not actually been paid yet. And then step six, you're going to create an asset and liabilities table. So below your transaction data, create a new section titled asset and list each asset type, like bank accounts, receivable, and the ending balance for the month. And you're going to create another section titled liabilities and list each liability type, like credit card payable, accounts payable, and then actually list the amount due. So in step seven, we're going to calculate equity. So equity is essentially what the business owns versus what the business owns minus what it owes. And at the basic level, this can go month by month with equity. And there might be additional draws or owner's investments, so those also need to be factored in. So list these under a section titled equity. And step eight, summarize and balance. So at the end of the assets and liability sections, calculate the totals and ensure the equations assets equal liabilities plus equity holds true. And if it doesn't, you're going to need to check your entries. This is to make sure everything's accounted for in the business. Step nine, you're going to want to update regularly. So at the end of the month, you're going to want to go through, review all the statements, and do all of this over again. And regularly updating will help catch and correct errors early and also provide ongoing insights into how the company is performing financially. Step 10, you're going to want to do some formatting and saving. So you're going to use bold, italics, and borders to make the sheet easy to read. Google Sheets will autosave, but you can also manually save versions for the backup which I would again highly recommend, just like we did with the P&L statement. And just an additional tip, if you're unsure about where to categorize a transaction, create a temporary uncategorized category and ask for clarification. So by putting it in this category, this is something that you can just do a hit list with your assistant so that it lessens your time and you can just go through what those transactions are. You can do that on a weekly basis. And so this process will help you maintain a basic balance sheet and will overall help you just see the financial aspects of the company. So again, these are processes that I would highly, highly recommend doing. Again, you do not have to have a financial degree to do this. We have laid everything out for you. We've already made the templates for you. So all you have to do is have your assistant go in and do these processes that we just kind of overviewed and outlined. It's extremely thorough in the sheet. Anybody can do this. They just need to take the templates, take your bank statements, and really just transfer the data over. And additionally, they're going to create those hit lists for you. So anything that you're missing in the business, you're going to be able to sit down and get through in just 1 or 2 sessions a month. So next, if you already have your assistant doing the P&L statement as well as the balance sheet, you're going to also want to have them do invoicing. So invoicing is really just this last piece, and we highly recommend you adding a user to your invoicing software. Again, for safety reasons, I would make sure they don't have full access to the invoicing, but instead one step down, just add them as a regular user, not an admin. So we're gonna wanna start with documentation, and you should always start with documentation. So have them have a blank document, sit down with your VA and talk about the ins and outs of the invoicing system. Write down your pricing model and point out the specifics of your contracts. Also, fully explain how your customer contracts impact pricing. And this includes a clear refund policy, a first invoice, a last invoice, and a recurring invoice. Every specific scenario for invoicing should be properly documented. And this should be a guide for dealing with common customer problems as well as more unique problems that could arise. And what's also convenient about this documentation is that you can keep it forever. So even as you onboard new assistants throughout the years, it will become a company artifact, and you can even task them with stylizing the document, making it part of the company. And we actually have a template in the packet that goes over all of this documentation, but take 1 hour, sit down and go over everything. So first, to start with the overview of the invoicing policy, you're gonna wanna have the introduction and the purpose of the policy and the importance for financial integrity and client relationships. Second, you're gonna wanna go down to roles and responsibilities. So clear definition of who is responsible for creating, sending the invoices, managing, and double checking, and the responsibilities on followed up unpaid invoices. Third, invoicing procedures. It's gonna be step-by-step instructions on how to create and send an invoice, guidelines on verifying the accuracy of invoice details, amount, client information, payment terms, etc. 4, billing information, details on what should be included in every invoice, which is the company name, contact information, client name and address, the description of goods and services, prices, totals, tax calculations, payment terms, due date, and any additional charges. Information on any standard billing increases, which includes hourly rate, per term charges, whatever it may be. And then 5th, you're gonna have a section on payment terms. So standard payment terms, accepted methods of payment, bank transfer, credit card, online payment platforms, etc. And then procedures for early payments, if discounts are offered. And 6, you're gonna wanna have a late payment policy and penalties or interest charged on late payments. So procedures for handling disputes over invoices, steps for escalating issues related to non-payment. I recommend first having your assistant do it, and then you get involved if it does not get resolved in a certain amount of time. And then 7 is invoice dispute violations. So a timeline for resolving disputes, contact information for disputes, all that jazz. And then 8 is confidentiality and data protection. So guidelines to ensure the confidentiality of client and transaction details, compliance with relevant data protection laws. If you have an invoicing system, they'll do a lot of this for you. 9 is record keeping. So how long you keep invoices, how long it should be retained. Again, if you have a system, this should already do it for you if you're using Stripe or something similar. And And then 10, software and tools. So this is detail about the invoicing software used, how to access and use the software, the guidelines for adding a new user, and then any sort of data backup. And then 11, audit and compliance. So fully go through the procedure if an audit occurs, and the compliance requirements that you're going to be expected to produce. And then 12 is amendments to the invoicing policy. So if you decide to change the invoicing policy, if you decide to change anything in that document, how many people need to sign off on it? Go through this in totality. And then 13 is training and support. So you're just going to want to put any additional resources, especially that are relevant to any of the invoicing systems that you currently use. And then 14, I would just put kind of an appendix section, any extra sections, glossary of terms, anything that you think is relevant, especially if there's something specific to your business. And then circling back to the actual invoicing, once you have this documentation figured out, we're going to dive into the steps of the actual invoicing. But again, I just want to reiterate, this is definitely a step that you can have your assistant do, but you have to take the time to help them create this document for your invoicing policy, because your company at the end of the day needs to have a standard operating procedure when it comes to invoicing. So to start the invoicing process, you're going to want to create an account for your assistant, and you're going to want to set up a user account in the invoicing software. And this usually involves logging into your admin account, navigating to the settings and selecting users, team, or similar options to add a new user. And then make sure you assign them the appropriate permissions. So to the assistant's account. So ensure that they have access to create, edit, and send invoices, but limited access to sensitive areas like financial reports or settings, unless it's absolutely necessary that they have those abilities. And then next, you're going to want to provide training. So I would actually sit down and walk your assistant through the exact way that you handle invoices. Again, that's going back to that documentation process. That's why we recommend that, so you can fully go through the documentation, but I would also show them how to fully use the invoicing software itself. So there might be some tutorials for your invoicing software. We're going to include in the packet some really common tutorials for some of the most common software, but if you use something that's outside of that list, send them some resources. And then additionally, I would actually get on with them and go through exactly how to do this. And that also comes to branding. So if you don't already have branded templates, this is the time to set your guidelines for your assistant to do so. And that means they can add company colors, logo, and text formatting in order to give your invoices a finalized look, a more finished look. We have some templates on how to do that as well. So you're going to want to implement a review system. So especially when you're starting off, make sure you have a senior member of the team approving invoices and actually taking the last step to send them. And then as your assistant gains more confidence, gains more experience, then shift that task to them. But you should definitely be sending the final invoices, at least in the beginning. It's a little nerve-wracking to kind of transfer over that responsibility to an assistant. But if you have the standard operating procedures, this is also going to help you in the future. And at the end of the day, invoicing is one of those things that should be able to be done by multiple people in your company, and should have a very clear, transparent policy. So if you're finding it hard to transfer over ownership to your assistant, that likely means that your invoicing system already needs a revamp, already needs to be restructured. So again, I would take the time to put a clear policy into place to mark down every single abnormality you might have with an invoicing system, and then make sure that your assistant is trained on it. Another thing that you can definitely outsource to your assistant is Docusign. It's just another one of those processes that can get really tedious. So if you regularly send out documents that are the same, I would highly recommend adding your assistant as a seat on Docusign. And this should be pretty self-explanatory. But again, we'll walk through it in the packet, but this will allow your assistant to send out contracts when necessary, which is again why you want to have them in meetings. And in our guide, we're going to have a step-by-step guide on how to do this. So let's go on to the next thing that you can give your assistant, which is project management. So I'm going to start off with a scenario and let me know if this sounds familiar. You get off a call and say that you're going to complete 4 tasks at the end of the call. Then you sit down to write down those tasks and you can only remember 3. And earlier I recommended keeping your assistant with you on calls. That's something I keep going back to. Again, I cannot stress it enough. But let's take it a step further. So have them set up a tracking software for your action items. So I personally like Asana. So I'm going to be talking about Asana in this video, but you can use another software like Monday, ClickUp, or Jira in order to keep these tasks transparent and make sure you're hitting all your benchmarks. So here's a step-by-step guide on how you would guide an assistant, or how you would have an assistant set up Asana effectively. And again, this is also going to be in the packet. We're gonna have templates in the packet as well. So step 1 is to set up and create an account. So you're gonna wanna go to Asana's website and sign up for an account. And you can honestly create a free account for this use case. If you really like it, upgrade. And you're gonna complete the registration, provide necessary details, email, company name, team size, etc. Pay attention, just don't run through these. Step 2 is you're gonna create a punch list. So I like to start with a list. And I call this list the today list. So this should be all the immediate action items and who is doing them. So your assistant's gonna be doing this entire process. And it is 100% worth it for the first task your assistant does in the morning to be this punch list. So they're gonna make a list of everything that everybody in the company needs to do, or everyone on their team. So yourself, colleagues, and the assistant. And so everyone's also gonna be able to see this so that you can track what every single person on your team is doing and see what your assistant is doing. And this creates a lot of responsibility. So each morning, your assistant should sit down, take a look at the board or calendar, and move items onto the punch list, which is the daily list. And that's gonna keep things moving and make sure every single things are getting completed. So that brings us to the board, like I just mentioned. So the board is for multiple step projects. So for example, when you get out of a meeting and you create a few action items that have to be done in a sequence, those are all items that would go on the board. And the board should start with foundational items, mid-size items, and then finishing touches. And this board is also a great place to store any to-do items that are far in the future or require an approval process. So the board is going to be for really overall tracking long-term projects. And we have some Asana board examples that your assistant can copy from our packet, but every morning they should look at the board and see what needs to be moved to the punch list, which is your day-to-day to-do list, and what items on the board need to be broken into smaller steps so that they can be on a future punch list. And this is going to make sure that you're keeping track of larger items. And then in Asana, you're also going to want to have a project calendar. So the project calendar is also going to be part of the morning check-in process, and it should only contain the bid project due dates. So they're going to want to cross-reference the board and make sure enough pieces of the board are being completed in time and assigned to the punch list in order to finalize the project. And this should also be part of your assistant's daily task, so that they recognize when a project is getting close and they can either help you slow down and focus on quality, or speed up if necessary. And then additionally, you're going to want to also have them document everything. So documentation is a great guideline. I'd highly recommend having the documentation process of your entire Asana, put it into a blank Google document that is stored in a standard operating procedures folder. All of this is in Asana, and we have multiple template recommendations as well as some Asana guidelines, which is going to get them started on that documentation project. But documentation, utmost importance, especially when dealing with Asana, invoicing, P&L, balance sheet, any of the above. Everything needs to be documented on how they're doing everything. Again, we're giving you some of that documentation to start with, but your assistant's going to need to add their own flair as well and make it relevant to your business, as well as keep it updated absolutely regularly. And I cannot recommend Asana enough. It's really helped our team optimize, and again, it keeps you in sync if you have one person who every single day is looking at the entire project from a broad perspective, from a more micro level, and then something kind of in the middle. That's gonna help keep you on track and get things assigned properly. Okay, so the next process that you're gonna wanna get your assistant set up on is going to be sales processes and sales help. And so my background is actually in sales, and so sales is definitely a hard process. But in this portion of the course, I'm gonna give you some actionable steps to help aid your sales process that your assistant can execute behind the scenes to keep your pipeline full. And make no mistake, your personal assistant is not your salesperson. However, they can help you lay foundation to build relationships, which can hopefully lead to sales in the future. And in this next section, I'm going to show you how I have personally used my assistants to land over 30 closed client contracts with 0 cold outreach. So you're going to need to have 2 types of CRMs, and you can store them in the same area. They're just going to need to be tagged differently. But one of these is going to be a CRM full of people who might have been at a similar conference as you, people that might be in similar areas that might be a relevant contact for you that you haven't necessarily had an interaction with. And then the second CRM is going to be a personal CRM. And the personal CRM are going to be people that you meet, people that you have meetings with, and that are on kind of close to your sleeve. So that can be anybody from friends to other referral partners to other people who are in similar businesses, or people you just frequently see because they're in your community sphere, or other people who may even be part of business groups that you're in. So to start, I'm actually going to begin with the first, which is more the cold outreach section. So there's a few different ways that you can do cold outreach. There's a few different CRMs that you can really start with. But what I highly, highly recommend is starting with HubSpot. HubSpot does have a free version if you're just trying to store contacts. It does get a little bit more complicated once you're actually doing outreach. But this is personally what I have done in order to help build my business, and it's been very effective. So cold outreach and the people that you're going to want to target, you can do so in a few different ways, but my personal favorite way and the way that I have found is the most effective is to have people that are at the same events as you. So you can do this either by going to a conference, and a lot of times conferences will give you a really large list of everybody that attends the conference. Have your assistant get access to that list and input into a CRM, which again, I'd recommend using HubSpot, their name, their title, the company they work for, as well as any other relevant information and any other contact info they can find, and have them put their LinkedIn info in the CRM as well. So what I would recommend, especially if you go to a large conference that might have thousands of attendees, have your assistant do 30 contacts a day. So take that list that you have from the conference, pick 30 contacts out every single day, and then on your end, you should go add the 30 most, of that 30, you should go add the most relevant people to your business immediately. So go on every single day, keep up with this. You should be sending about 10 LinkedIn requests a day. And if you're posting content regularly, this is what's going to trigger people to interact with you because you're going to be growing your audience. And if you're providing a service or if you have a product that might be relevant to people, they're going to see information about that product and they're going to start subconsciously becoming familiar with it. And they might even reach out. You don't actually have to do cold outreach for this. Absolutely, you can. You can even take it a step further and start sending email sequences, which you do have to pay for in HubSpot. It ends up being around $500 a month. But in all honesty, you can just stick with getting their name and then LinkedIn and just keeping them in your sphere. And this will even help eventually maybe build relationships. If you get a really good contact out of that, you might be able to do some cold outreach directly. But for the most part, just having these people on your LinkedIn is going to be extremely valuable. And if you're not going to a conference, or if you don't have any relevant data for your assistant to pull from that conference piece, what you can also do is you can look at local events that are in town. So I would check 3 different places, and I would have your assistant regularly look in 3 different areas. The first would be Luma. I would highly recommend Luma. There's a lot of events that are listed, and you can even look at your city on Luma and see what events that are going on nearby. And sometimes Luma will have open invite list, so you can pull that data from the invite list. Again, have your assistant add these into your personal CRM. So pull the invite list from Luna, mark where they came from, and then just start adding these people on LinkedIn slowly. Again, that's ingratiating you in a network without having to physically go to some of these events. And it's a really good way to build a little bit of credibility, because if you're meeting with people, or if you're trying to do cold outreach to somebody and they have 50 plus connections with you, they're going to be a lot more likely to take the meeting. And so if you're hitting people that are in this community, your target audience is going to be connected with a lot of the same people. Again, I'd highly recommend that. And then you could repeat this exact same process for things like Eventbrite or other meetups, especially ones that are centered around your target demographic. Of course, I always recommend going to events. I'm actually an event organizer, and I found it to be very helpful to have in-person conversations. But this is a way, if you're unable to attend, that you can kind of navigate that, and you can still get some of these meaningful contacts and some of these meaningful LinkedIn connections without actually having to attend. And having your assistant automate that and go ahead and actually find these LinkedIn profiles is going to save you a ton of time. And so in our packet, I'm going to have a step-by-step guide on how to do this and how you should format your HubSpot CRM. It's a lot of personal preference when it comes to HubSpot. You can keep it super basic, but it's going to go through every single step of the process. And so next, we're going to move on to the personal CRM. And I love having a personal CRM, and I personally don't keep my personal CRM on HubSpot. I actually keep my personal CRM on Google Sheets. And that might sound a little antiquated, but it actually helps because it does become a little bit more personalized, and you're able to really look at the data and edit it as necessary. So every single time I take a meeting with anyone, I have my assistant look at my meetings list and proactively add people onto that Google Sheet. So I try to do quite a few one-on-one meetings. I have a Calendly link, it's a 15-minute Calendly link, and I'll reach out to people that I've met either through networking events or just through my sphere of influence, and I'll try to schedule 15 minutes with them so that I can hear a little bit about their business, and then I can also tell them about my business. On that spreadsheet, I have my assistant put the date, the name, and then any notes that are relevant about the meeting, that person, their company, where they might be relevant to me. And sometimes they won't know all that information. It's still worth it for them to start getting started on it, and that'll shortcut a lot for you. And so with my personal CRM, once my assistant kind of gets that set up and populates my meetings, it gives me a place to take notes. And then also I'll highlight people that I don't think are relevant to keep in my short list personal CRM, either because they're in a totally different industry that doesn't have any impact on me, or because they might not be in the place to give referrals, especially in the entrepreneurial community. And I'll actually move them, and after just highlighting them, my assistant will go back through and move them to the more general CRM. So that Google Sheet, you're gonna wanna have the people that are hyper relevant to your business. And again, that could even be friends that just have a lot of contacts in your industry that might be able to throw you business. I really highly recommend, again, keeping this on a Google Sheet, and it's so you can start separating out people that wouldn't be relevant. And then also on that Google Sheet, what I have my assistant do is, after I have a really good conversation with somebody and I want to follow up, my assistant actually goes through and sees, puts a mark 2 weeks from the first time that I have a meeting to 2 weeks later, and she sends me notification every single morning when that 2 week mark hits and says, hey, you need to go ahead and contact this list of people and just check in with them, see if any of the connections you sent them went through, see if there's anything else you can do for their business. If you tried their product, mention that you tried it, basically to keep those lines of communications open, because that is how you build business, is by creating really good relationships, but you can't possibly keep track of all the people that you're meeting and interacting with. So it really helps to have an assistant who's also helping you propel those relationships forward. And then it also allows you to keep people in mind. So let's say you have a conversation with somebody who runs an operations business and you think that they're very cool, their product's really cool, and you like their methodology. You can then in turn keep them at the top of mind for recommendations. And you do that by just continuously checking in, especially if you think you could also be a good referral partner to someone. But having that assistant double check and make sure that you're actually pushing your relationships forward, it's going to give you a lot of accountability and developing more meaningful relationships with business contacts. And so apart from some of the sales that your assistant can definitely help you make just by developing relationships, another thing that your assistant can do is booking excursions, especially for clients. This is something that I personally love to do, and it's something I've found really effective. There are even little things like escape rooms or ball games, anything that you think would be relevant for your specific type of client. And that's especially one thing I always tell people who work in tech is if you have some clients who are spending a lot of money with you, I would highly recommend taking those decision makers out for a hands-on project. Escape rooms is the example I just gave. I think they're a really good way, and people who are in tech usually tend to like that sort of problem solving. With ball games, it might be hit or miss. They might really love football, they might hate it, but a lot of people that are in tech usually really like escape rooms or something similar. Another, if you don't want to spend escape room capital, another one that I can recommend is doing a trivia night. Having your assistant research some trivia nights in the area and hosting an event there for your clients. And then it also gives you the opportunity to invite other people that you think are relevant for your business that you're trying to build a better relationship with. And your assistant going through your personal CRM can also help you identify those people. And then there are also, in almost every single city, some fun pop-ups that come up. One thing that we have in Austin is we actually have a game trivia night. So you can go rent out a room and you do a trivia show, kind of think Family Feud style, but you do it on Teams with a group of people. So if you can set something like that up or find something like that in your city, your assistant can do that research, and it really becomes valuable in going after those larger clients and also helping maintain client relationships that you have with people that you think are going to keep spending money with your business. That's a great way to really set that foundation. So I hope that you found this helpful. We're gonna have a really large list of resources in that packet. And the way that our packet is divided is into two different pieces. One is gonna be just the owner operator action steps. So this is gonna be a packet that if all you want to do is read the steps and just do these little maintenance things, it's gonna give you a step-by-step guide on how to get all these processes set up. And then the second half is going to be your assistant's standard operating procedure. So I would recommend looking through that, making sure that it's aligning with your company goals, and even downloading it and adding, removing, or editing pages. But overall, if you want to be hands-off, could just do the steps in your packet and have your assistant completely take over everything in their packet. But this is going to be a comprehensive guide so that when you get started, your assistant is going to be able to take over almost all of the operations pieces, all of the sales pieces that are relevant to building higher end relationships, and any other practices you might have in the business. But I really believe that this is a good foundation. We've been doing this for a while. We've been sourcing virtual assistants, and it's so important to start off with the right one. But once you find that person, you have to also assign them things to do in the business so that they're able to stay relevant. So I really highly recommend, even if you don't want to implement every single thing in this packet, take a look at it and try to implement some of the things, because at the end of the day, all these items that are listed in the packet are still items that you are currently completing, whether you realize it or not. You might just not have a standard operating procedure for it, but you're still carrying the mental weight and the mental load
of completing these projects. So offload that to somebody that you trust, offload that onto a personal assistant, and make sure that you're keeping your business up to date, running extremely efficiently, and also that you're getting value out of a personal assistant service. Because once you start chipping away at these operations pieces and at these sales pieces, you're going to actually realize, and I swear this happens every single time, you're going to realize how much more free time you actually have to start working on some of these larger projects and to start doing the things that your business truly operates for, and get back to the root of why you decided to start your business. And lastly, I'm Paris Bland. I'm the founder of Digital Executive. We help small businesses and founders find extremely talented virtual assistants and other staff members based in South America and Argentina. So if you want to get started, if you're having trouble finding that good assistant, that perfect assistant, please send us a message. We're more than happy to help you not only find a really good assistant, but then also help them implement some of these practices that are going to take your business to the next level. Thanks so much for watching. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to us.